everybody. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all doing really well and have had a great weekend. I am Gina. I'm with Advantage College Planning, and I'm really excited to talk with you all tonight about key milestones for 11th through 9th grade students. So if this is your first time here, welcome. I like to come on and share some information every couple weeks about the college planning process and getting ready for all of those exciting things to come in the beginning of senior year to try to help reduce the stress of the process. And sometimes that involves talking about what you can do ahead of time to make things a little bit smoother along your way. If you have joined me before, welcome back. It's always great to have you here. If you are able to hear me, go ahead and put a thumbs up. Let me know that everything is coming through okay. And also we'll be able to use the chat function to be able to share any questions that you have, any comments. For now, if you'd like, you can put in information about where you're tuning in from. So I'm currently located in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, but we do have offices all up and down the East Coast, all the way from Maine to Buffalo to North Carolina to Florida. So whole East Coast is represented. So if you are tuning in from our local area or one of those other areas, I'd love to know. And also it would be great to know what year your students are, because this way I can make sure I'm giving you information that's most helpful to you at this time. Like I said, we are going to be talking about those key milestone markers as we go through from 9th all the way up through 11th grade. So just trying to make sure that the information will be relevant to all of you. Awesome. So the comments section is open. You can go ahead and put comments in there, and then I'll have time for questions and answers at the end as well. And you'll be using that comment section for Q&A as well. So you can play around in there and get used to it if you want. Awesome. Great. So we've got some folks from Raleigh. Always good to see you. Ooh, with a freshman. Perfect. So you are ready. This is going to be really good for you. Get ready to take some notes. Awesome. So let's jump in and talk about why we are thinking about 9th all the way through 11th grade. And the reason for that is to reduce stress. So a big part of what we do at Advantage College Planning is reduce the stress of that college planning process for students and their families. It does not need to be this super difficult, stressful time. We really believe that. And so with some planning ahead and some intention, we really can reduce that stress. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to go through each grade, 9th, 10th, and 11th. And then for each grade, I have a format of focusing on core areas of academics and extracurricular engagement, and independence. But then each year we add a little bit more in addition to those three things that they need to be focused on. So that'll be our pattern for this evening. So let's start talking about 9th grade academics. So our freshmen, super exciting. They've had, a couple of weeks of high school, depending on where you live and how your school system works. And so that's really great. Freshman year is really, the whole point is just getting acclimated. I think of freshman year, like, if you've ever bought a goldfish, right, from the pet store, you can't just bring it home and plop it into your tank. It has to get acclimated to the water temperature. You have to leave it in its little baggie and put it in the bigger tank and let it kind of swim around in its little baggie so it doesn't go into shock, right? And then once it's had time to get comfortable, then you open the baggie and you let the goldfish swim around in the big tank. That's how I think of freshmen. So that switch from middle school to the big high school, it can be a shock to their system, right? It's really big. They've got 2 minutes to get from, maybe the 4th floor, top corner on the left to the first floor, bottom corner on the right. That's a literal stressor that I was talking with one of my students about last week, and try to figure out how to get where they're going, and they're trying to look cool while doing it, whatever that means. And there's just a lot going on, and they're constantly every day learning about something new that they didn't know existed before, like a rule or a club or some kind of opportunity. So, or what to avoid or to get in the cafeteria for lunch, right? Everything is new. So freshman year, it's a little bit of a shock to the system. The whole point of it is acclimating. But once the students kind of start to get acclimated these next couple of weeks, the first things that we really want to think about are their academics. And so sit down with your student. This is what we do with all of our students. So if you're working with us, we got you. This is what we're already doing. But if you're looking for a game plan, sit down with your student, maybe not this week, like give them, a couple days to get settled, but sit down with them and go to the high school's website and pull up their course registration information that usually is posted on the student services page or school counseling page, and just start to take a look. And maybe you did this when they were getting ready to go from 8th to 9th grade, but pull that stuff out now and let's look at what classes are available to students at the high school, not just for 9th grade, but all the way up through to the end of senior year. Sometimes when students are planning out their classes going from 8th to 9th grade, the high school only gives the students, so that it's not overwhelming, a shorter list of what's available specifically for freshmen. So they might not even know what all the options are at your high school. So really sit down and look at, okay, what are all the different math courses that are offered? What are all the English and history and science and world language courses? And what are the requirements that I need to take in order to graduate? And then what do I think I might want to take? Let's just start making a game plan. But also make sure that you are including those elective and CTE or career and technology education courses as well. Don't ignore those. Sometimes students are so focused on the core classes that they need to take to graduate, and they see those CTE and elective classes as kind of fluff as other. And then if they do that, they're really missing out. Those elective classes are a fantastic opportunity to pursue their strengths or learn about an area that they could potentially become interested in, but they just don't even know it exists yet, right? So what do they offer? Do they offer, entrepreneurship 1 and 2 if your student's interested in business? Do they have a whole series of hospitality classes if your student's interested in that field? So look at all of the different options and start to map out a plan. I always tell students we are using a Google Doc. We are not using a PDF. The whole purpose of this is that it's probably going to change as you get more information, as you take more classes, as your interests change and evolve over the next few years. This is going to change too. But let's have a general roadmap of what you think you might want to do, right? Map out what the options are for honors and AP classes. Look to see if there's any prerequisite courses. Maybe your student really wants to take AP art. They're an artist and that's what they love, and they really want to take an AP art class, advanced placement art. Amazing. But most schools are going to say that you need a prerequisite. You need a certain number of introductory level art courses before you're even eligible to register for AP art. So these are the things we want to start thinking about freshman year so that we don't get to junior year and have the student say, all right, I'm ready to take AP art. And I'm like, well, you only took 1 art class and you have to have 3 art classes before you can take AP art. And now you don't have time, right? That's a bummer. So if we can plan ahead and think about what does the school offer and what might I want to take, then that's really great. It can also help give the student an idea of what's available. So when they start hearing older students talking about AP US government and politics or, AP psychology or AP calculus, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, and they can start to tune in. Oh, what teacher is good? What teacher is more challenging? It's just helpful context for them to know. The other thing we want to do is freshman year, you'll want to try to meet with your school counselor. Now, right now we're in the fall. School counselors are probably really focused on their seniors right now. Well, first, right now, they're probably focused on figuring out all the scheduling problems that you're coming to them with. Once those get resolved, they're probably going to be really focused on seniors, making sure that their applications are going out on time this fall. Once seniors get their applications in, school counselors have a little bit more time to talk with underclassmen. Some high schools, maybe your high school, has a specific set of counselors only for freshmen, and then another set of counselors that work with students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So if that's the case, they're available. They're there for you. Meet with your school counselor, whatever their system is, figure out a way to meet with them. A lot of them, you can book them on the student services website. They have a calendar. You can book an appointment, but help them get to know you, what your interests are. They're a great person to help you navigate what opportunities could be available at the high school because they don't know. Remember, they're a little goldfish that just made it into this massive aquarium. They don't know all the ins and outs yet, right? So the school counselors can recommend different classes, or they can recommend clubs or activities or ways to get involved that your student may not even be aware of. So school counselors are a great resource. Definitely make sure they're connecting with them at some point during ninth grade. After academics, the second most important thing for ninth grade is that extracurricular engagement. So some students coming into ninth grade are getting involved in band or theater or chorus or sports, maybe like a carryover from something they were already doing in middle school and they wanted to continue with it in high school. If that's your student, awesome. That's super helpful because it's just automatically giving them some structure, some community within their new environment. Great. If your student does not fall into one of those groups, right, then let's figure out a way to get them involved. One of the things that I do with all of my freshmen is we go to the high school's website and we go to the student clubs page. And we can look to see all the different clubs and organizations that are going to be running during this current school year. And we just talk about them. We just get curious. I ask a lot of questions. What's this club? What's that club? I've never heard of this. We click on things, right? And start to look at what is out there that your student might be interested in. And then as the student's pointing things out and calling out, oh, maybe this, maybe that, I'm writing it down. I'm keeping a running list of, okay, here are the 2 or 7 different clubs that you said, oh, maybe might be interesting to you. Great. Then let's take the next step and let's look at getting involved. So a lot of high schools will have a club fair sometime in the first month of school where students can go and talk to current students who are in those clubs and learn a little bit more about them, maybe sign up just to come to an interest meeting or something like that. Some high schools, you just look on the website and you see when the interest meeting is, the date and the time, and you go to that classroom. So find one activity, maybe is a big stretch for your student. Know your student. If you have a super introverted student and this is overwhelming for them, they're not signing up for 17 clubs, right? It doesn't matter how extroverted you were in high school. If your student is an introvert, we're not doing that, right? Maybe it's just going to be one, or maybe there's a bunch of things that they want to learn about. That's also great, right? What we want to do is just help them find something. I don't care if it's anime club or if it's, the future Medical Doctors of America club. It doesn't have to be a club that's specific to what they want to do for their major. It could just be something for fun. Remember, the whole goal here is acclimate. So getting involved in a club or some kind of organization freshman year is going to help your student potentially get tapped into the school, meet other students, and at the very least, get to know one more adult in that building who would be the club advisor. Right? We want to help them find an adult who can look out for them. So they've got their core teachers, they've got their elective teachers, they've got their counselor, and then maybe a club advisor. Great. So just getting them in other orbits. Okay. Then they go to the meeting, maybe there's something good, but yeah, like I said, we just want to get them basically involved. Go to a meeting, see how it goes. After the academics and extracurricular engagement, the other core milestone that I really want my freshmen to be hitting by the end of freshman year is take some steps towards becoming a bit more independent. And obviously that's going to mean something different for every student. But what we want to think about is, okay, we have 4 years, if they're freshmen, we have 4 years to get them ready to go be on their own without you in a dorm room with a whole bunch of other 18-year-olds, right? And have them know how to make decisions that are best for themselves and take care of themselves. So for some freshmen, that means this is the year when they need to start waking themselves up for school. I have a lot of students I work with who are freshmen who are still woken up by a parent because they're a heavy sleeper, or that's just kind of the way that it's always worked. And I totally understand that. But you're not going to be in that dorm room with your student. And if they have an 8 a.m. class that they've never had to wake themselves up for, freshman year, when they're another small goldfish in an even bigger aquarium, is not the year to be trying to figure out how to set an alarm. Right? So that's an example. Another area of independence that I talk with a lot of my students about is getting access to and starting to use the family calendar. A lot of the students that I work with have a family calendar that one of the parents runs, right? And then everybody puts their appointments and everything on the family calendar. So this way we all know where we're going, in these busy lives. But the students don't always have access to it on their phone. They're not subscribed to it. Or maybe they're subscribed to it, but they don't actually add their own activities. They just kind of pull up their phone like they're the CEO, right? And you're their personal assistant managing their calendar for them. which is lovely for your student. But again, when they get to college, they're going to go back to being low man on the totem pole. They're not going to be the CEO anymore, and they're not going to have you as their personal assistant telling them where they need to go and when they need to be there, right? So taking ownership of that calendar as a freshman is really great. So getting more involved in that process. Also basic things like doing laundry, that's another one, right? So again, thinking about, you want them to not store up all of their laundry until they come home for fall break, like just those types of things. Small step towards independence. And really that's it. Right? Again, it's about acclimating. So make an academic plan, start getting into the routine of that homework, extracurricular activities, and let's boost up that independence a little bit. All right. So then next step is we're going to talk about 10th grade. So in 10th grade, academics. So now, all right, when we're getting into 10th grade, we've had a year, we've had freshman year to acclimate a little bit. We're familiar now with what the workload might be. Maybe we took a mix of some academic and some honors classes. If your student did really well in their classes, let's step it up a little bit, right? So the first milestone of 10th grade is stepping up the academic rigor where appropriate. So many schools offer a wide range of honors and advanced placement or IB, International Baccalaureate, or even dual enrollment classes for their students who want a bit more challenge. Just because the high school offers it doesn't mean your student should take it. Your student should take classes that challenge them in ways that are appropriate for them. So if your student loves history and got a high A in their honors history class, and if that high school offers AP US government and politics sophomore year, instead of taking the honors version of the class, go for it. Take the AP class, right? Let's start increasing the level of rigor, kind of increasing the weight to build the muscle every year. We want to be increasing that academic weight appropriately. If your student was in all academic level classes and doing really well, then let's step up to an honors class and see how that goes, right? So colleges are expecting to see a little bit of a step up in rigor every year. And so 10th grade is really where that can begin. This is also a time to adjust that 4-year plan a little bit. So maybe over the course of 9th grade in the summer, your student really started to get into computer science or engineering, right? So if that's the case, then we know, okay, colleges are probably going to be looking more at their math classes. So let's look to see what maths your high school offers. What's the highest level math you could potentially take if math is going well for you? And let's make some adjustments. Or maybe they might want to take AP computer science if the high school offers it. And we didn't have that on our schedule before. Let's maybe weave that in. So make adjustments as necessary. Again, this is also a time to meet with your school counselor. So now this is when you might want to tell your school counselor, okay, here's the classes I'm thinking of taking. I've mapped out a tentative 4-year plan. What do you think about this? Get their input. Also let your school counselor know I'm planning on going to college, because they're working with students who have all different kinds of plans. So if your plan is to go to a 4-year college, let your college counselor or your high school counselor know that, right? So then they know, okay, that's your plan. I can give you suggestions that would fall in line with what it is that you're planning. Also share with them any ideas that you have. So if you're thinking, I think I might want to major in psychology, and here are some of the colleges that I have on my list so far that I'd like to learn more about. Keep them in the loop. They can give you some really great suggestions potentially of things that you can be doing to put you in a good position for navigating the next couple of years. When it comes to extracurricular engagement in 10th grade, this is a year now we're going to step it up. So 9th grade was acclimating, but now 10th grade, okay, you've had a chance to get a sense of what's going on. Maybe there was a club that you found out about in 9th grade, but it was too late to join. So 10th grade, let's get on that, right? If there was a club that your friends were doing or you heard about that was really cool, now's the time to get on that. If there was a club that you were in and you really liked it and you want to come back again sophomore year, fantastic. Now it's time to step up your level of involvement in that club or activity. So maybe freshman year, you were a member. Sophomore year, what can you contribute? Sometimes that might mean getting an official position, like a board position or an officer position. Sometimes not. You could potentially, instead of being the vice president, there's only so many of those, right? We can look at, well, how can you contribute in a way that's unique to you? So maybe you notice that There's nobody is, I don't know, nobody's keeping in touch with all of the different members and letting them know when all of the meetings are. And you love doing that kind of thing. So you set up like an app, or you set up a system to tell everybody when the meetings are, right? Or maybe the club has a bunch of speakers that come in and no one's taking notes to capture the highlights of that speaker, but you really like, your student really likes doing that. Take those notes, right? Maybe you have a really cool speaker coming in and your high school has a newspaper. And so maybe you take some notes and then you pitch that to the school newspaper and say, hey, do you want to publish this article about this speaker that we brought in from our club? Right? So that doesn't necessarily come with the territory of I was the president, but that's a way that you are using your strengths, right? The student is using their strengths to meaningfully impact that club. That's what we're looking for. If your student is involved in sports or music or theater, this also could potentially come in the form of mentoring newer students, right? So if you're a sophomore, you might still be on the JV team, and then with other incoming freshmen, you can take those freshmen under your wing and help them, right? That's a form of mentoring. That's leadership. That shows a lot about your character and your empathy, right? Those are the kinds of things that we're looking for in those activities. So not just going and engaging in the activity to get your hours, but also what else can you contribute, or what else can you learn from and get out of that activity? Another thing I always want my sophomores to start thinking about is their summer. So summer before junior year, we want to start thinking about what do you want to get involved in? What's a meaningful activity you want to do that summer? And that can mean submitting applications for summer programs as early as February or even January. Some deadlines come up early, especially for students who might want to volunteer at like a local hospital or something. Those are usually pretty competitive positions. So those applications open and close real quick in January and February when it's freezing cold and no one is thinking about the summer. So it's kind of like, remember back in the day when you had to sign your elementary schooler up for those track out camps and they would open and close in a day. And if you weren't on it, you were left scrambling. It's kind of like that all over again, right? So you have to be on it in like earlier part of the year, January, February. So just start thinking about what you might want to do in the summer. And then let's look at, what activities might have or what programs might have early deadlines that we need to be aware of. Step it up. That is the name of the game for sophomores. And so then the next thing we need to step up that gets introduced sophomore year is testing. So students who are applying to college will typically be taking either the SAT or the ACT, or sometimes both. And so in sophomore year, many students have an opportunity to take a practice version of those assessments. There's the PSAT and the pre-ACT. Both are practice versions of those two different standardized tests. And so if your student has an opportunity to take those either or both through their high school, I would recommend doing it. So both of these tests are purely practice. The scores will not be used for anything. They will not be sent to colleges. But the benefit is your student will have exposure to these two different testing formats. You're going to get to see what the testing platform is like. You're going to get a sense of like the timing and the pacing. Students can also get a sense of how they do, right? So the SAT and the ACT are two different standardized tests. They're like Coke and Pepsi. They are competitors. They are similar products, but they are competitors run by completely different companies, and people tend to have a preference of one over the other. Okay, Coke and Pepsi. So the SAT is a shorter test, and it only has two sections, math and an English reading section, and you kind of go back and forth between those two a couple of times. The ACT takes a little bit longer to complete. They currently have four sections: math, English, reading, and science. For you, those of you with younger students, the science section is about to become optional. So that's a little bit of a change the ACT is making to try to compete with the SAT because their test is shorter. But yeah, so that's coming. But so they're two different tests. The SAT tends to have fewer questions, but you have a little bit more time per question, but you have to use a little bit more critical thinking. The ACT tends to be faster moving. You have much less time per question, but the questions tend to be a bit more straightforward and surface level. So again, Coke and Pepsi, students tend to have a preference of one test over the other. So if you're able to take the practice version of each of those, then in 10th grade, then that's going to give your student a lot of information, right? About how they did on these tests, which tests did they like better, and then they can have an idea of which one they want to move forward with, either the SAT or the ACT, when it comes to official testing for their college application. So definitely think about testing. The next thing we want to think about with our 10th graders is we want to think about the college search. So college search process starts a little bit with these 10th grade students. You know, they don't need to know what college they want to go to. They don't need to know officially what their major is, but they do need to know, hey, I think I want to go to college. Let's just start putting our toe in the water. So in 10th grade, weekend college campus visits, and then the summer between 10th and 11th grade can be a great time for students to visit college campuses. The weekend visits and the summer visits tend to be a little bit more laid back because there's not a lot of college students on campus. So it's a pretty low stakes way to visit. It's not going to be super intense, but it's a great way for your student just to kind of get a little bit of an idea of, you know, what different options are out there. So we're not necessarily trying to narrow down which colleges they're applying to at that point, but what we are looking at is, how do you feel on a really big public campus, right? Big public university with acres of lands and like tens of thousands of students, right? How do you feel on a smaller private college campus? How do you feel on a rural campus or an urban campus, right? What's the vibe? Where do you tend to feel most comfortable? And so I recommend students and families start with schools that are within a few hours of where you live, just to get a sense of those different campuses, right? So for my New England folks, right, living up in Maine, touring Bowdoin College is going to feel very different than touring the University of Maine, right? Both New England colleges, very different atmosphere, location, vibe, right? For my Florida folks, University of Central Florida versus Rollins College, right? Both in Orlando area, but very different experience. SUNY Buffalo versus Keuka College, NC State versus Davidson, right? They're all within a couple hours potentially of where you live, but the vibe is going to be very different. And so if you can start to narrow down, okay, here's where I felt most comfortable, here's what I don't know if this is going to be the right fit for me. Then when you start creating your college list and your student says, oh, what about this college? And that college is going to require a flight, a plane ride to go visit. You could say, well, but we toured a school like that and you didn't love it, right? And it's going to help you identify, okay, should we prioritize that travel or not? So that's going to give you a little bit of context. It's also really helpful just to get a sense of what to expect on a campus tour, like the parking, like just the cadence of it, right? Like the parking and, okay, there's an info session and these are the types of topics and the information that gets shared by the tour guides, because a lot of times you don't know what kind of questions to ask until you've done it a couple times. Again, parents, like think back to when you were first touring preschools, right? I know like when I was first touring daycares and preschools, the first one I went to, I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah, everything's fine. I have no questions. I don't know. Everything's great. Seems great. And then I went to the next one and I was like, oh, because I had something to compare to, right? And I was like, oh, well, okay, do you do this and do you do that? And by the third one, I felt like an expert, right? And I was like, okay, now I know what to ask. Now I know what to compare to. But when you don't have any context for it, it's really hard and everything, it's overwhelming and everything just seems great, right? So this is the time to kind of get the jitters out, get your toes wet, and tour those local colleges, okay? We also should talk about independence. So 10th grade independence, this is when, again, I want them using those calendars. I want them actively engaging in those calendars. And this is also a time for your student to start becoming more independent with their classes and their study habits. So if they're going to be successful in college, they not only have to have the academics, in the class knowledge and skills, But again, they're going to be on their own. They are not going to have you there reminding them or telling them to shut off the video games because they have a test tomorrow they have to study for. So they need to start taking a little bit of ownership of getting into some routines, learning how to study, learning how to take notes. This is a good year for them to start taking on a little bit more of that responsibility. All right, so then we get into 11th grade. Very exciting. So this is the last, year that colleges are going to see grades. So when your students apply to college, it will be in the fall of their senior year of high school. Colleges will see what classes your students are taking. They will not see the grades typically that your students have earned. So these junior grades are important. So again, we really want to make sure we're adjusting that 4-year plan. We want to have a higher level of rigor potentially, right, than we had in 10th grade. And we really want to put effort into those classes. These are also the teachers, these 11th grade teachers are the ones who will be writing the letters of recommendation. So I really work with my students on figuring out how to get these teachers to know them as a person and identifying what qualities do you want this teacher to be able to share about you in these letters. And then we need to make sure that you're showing those qualities in the classroom. I have students who say, oh, I'm a leader. That's a really big part of who I am. And then I'm like, okay, great. How does that show up in the classroom? Silence. Right. And they tell me how they're a leader in all these other areas, but your teacher doesn't see that. Right. So if you want your teacher to be able to talk about that specific character quality in you, we've got to figure out how you can be intentional and show that quality in the classroom. So thinking about that now is going to make your life easier when you ask for those letters of recommendation in May. Okay, especially if you're like a first semester, second semester schedule. So like here in Wake County, where I'm located, the students, many of the schools, not all, but many of the schools have a first semester set of teachers and then a whole new set of teachers second semester. So we really want to take advantage of both of those. This is also another time when I really want you meeting with your school counselor. Discuss your interests, discuss what you're thinking for your possible major, discuss the colleges that you're considering, and ask them about any resources or courses or any ideas that could be a good fit for you. They are a great resource. Make sure that you're using them. After we get the academics on point, this is the last year to be wrapping up that extracurricular engagement. So I call it filling holes. Where are the holes in your extracurriculars? Let's make sure we're plugging those holes. So for example, if you are dead set on a specific major, like what you want to study, do you have any activities that are aligned with that? Or does it seem really disconnected from how you spend your time, right? Colleges are going to look at your activity list to get an idea of your character and to get an idea of who you are as a person, right? How do you spend your time when you're not in class? So if you look at all of your activities, does that match up with how you see yourself? If not, we've got time to fix it. This is also a time to take on that higher level role in all of your extracurriculars. Go for those officer positions. Think about what kind of lasting impact can you have on these groups or organizations that you're a part of. If that's a part-time job, have you been working there for a while and can you get promoted? Or if that's a club, can you get a new position? If it's a sport, right? Can you position yourself to be a mentor or potentially be a captain or potentially take on some kind of role that's positively impacting that community, right? So this is your last year to really put in that effort in a way that's going to leave a lasting impression and a lasting impact behind after you graduate from your high school, which is really important. And also think about, what are you learning from these activities? So if it's junior year and you've been involved since you were a freshman, why? What are you getting out of this? How are you growing? What are you learning? Right? Many of your supplemental college essays will come back to things related, or prompts will come back to and things that were related to your extracurricular activities. So if you're engaging in them meaningfully, it's going to make it a lot easier to write those essays. Trust me. Then let's talk about your independence. So 11th grade independence. I really need you to be scheduling your own appointments at this point, right? Because again, I need you to think about parents, like your student is going to be not living with you. If they have, let's say they see someone regularly for therapy, they have an optometrist, they go for any kind of regular appointments, they have to know how to schedule those appointments, right? Because you're not always going to be there to do that for them. So now's a great time to teach them how to schedule their own appointments, take the initiative to go meet with teachers during working lunch periods or after school, because that's a really important part of being successful in college, is meeting with your professors during their office hours and knowing how to do that. If students never do that in high school, do you know how intimidating that would be to go in college if you've never like gone to a teacher's office hours and now you're going to go to a professor's office hours on a college campus? Oh, so overwhelming and scary and intimidating, right? So these are the things we need to start doing now and build up that strength to set them up for success once they get to college. This is also a time when, if they have not done so already, they need to start taking ownership for cleaning up their own space, right? Cleaning up their own room, doing their own laundry, also managing their own basic medications, right? They're going to get a fever at some point when they're in their dorm room. So how much Tylenol do you take? How often are you taking that Tylenol if you have a fever? These are the kinds of things also just let them start taking on, make sure that they know how to do. When it comes to testing in 11th grade, there's a couple of dates that you need to keep in mind. So like with 10th grade, you can take the PSAT. Some schools offer in 10th grade. That'd be in October of 10th grade. And in 11th grade, they also offer the PSAT to all 11th grade students in October. It's usually a mid-October test. You'll be taking it at the high school. I highly recommend all of the juniors take the PSAT. If you have not planned to or registered already, get on that. You want to take it. It's a practice for the SAT. You would never just show up for your driving test at the DMV without practicing first, right? So don't show up for the SAT without having at least done one practice PSAT. But also, if your student happens to be a really strong test taker, their score on the PSAT in 11th grade could qualify them as a national merit semifinalist. And then that can move forward into, additional scholarship opportunities. But if they never take that test, they miss out on the opportunity to qualify. That's the qualification test. So definitely recommend doing that. Once you cross that hurdle, you'll also want to start thinking about the SAT or the ACT. Here in North Carolina, the high schools also offer the ACT to all juniors in usually end of February, beginning of March for free during the school day. I recommend taking that. But then on your own, you can register for the SAT or the ACT on select Saturdays throughout the year. So you want to start thinking about which test do you want to take, what dates are going to work best for you. And I typically recommend that students take either the SAT or the ACT more than once, because most colleges will super score and take the highest combination of your scores. So it's in your best interest to test more than once. All right, 11th grade, college search. This is the year that we want to really lean into identifying your key college criteria academically, personally, and financially. And then we want to continue refining your college list. So February of junior year is a great time to start planning those spring campus visits for any schools you haven't been able to see yet, because spring break is coming up. That's a great time to visit when the college students are on campus, but you're off. Spring break is a great time to do that. Check out visiting during the weekday. Some schools offer tours of specific majors or programs that you might be interested in. And schools will also be offering large scale open houses. So you definitely want to do that so you can really start paring down your college list and knowing which schools you want to be applying to. Colleges will also be sending representatives to your high schools, especially in the fall. And they're there to connect with you and tell you about their school, and for you to get to know them and them to get to know you. So as you're hearing those announcements, if there's a school you're interested in, go to that info session, get to know that rep. That potentially could be the person who's reading your application. So it's always good to put a good face with the name there. And then in the spring of junior year, that's when we start college applications. So in about April, May, that's when, after AP exams, that's when you'll want to create your Common Application account. That's when you'll want to start working on your personal essay for your college applications. And that's also when you're going to want to ask teachers for letters of recommendation, spring of junior year. Ask them before the summer so they can work on those recs in the summer if they want to. The summer before 12th grade is when the bulk of application work happens for us with our students. I'd recommend you do that as well. Get your personal essay done, finalize your college list, go to any campuses that you haven't visited yet to really wrap that up. There is an ACT that is offered usually in mid-July. There's an SAT that's offered at the end of August. So kind of wrap up your testing plans the summer before 12th grade so that when 12th grade starts, you can hit the ground running with those applications. So the bottom line is, if you can plan ahead about these key milestones, it's really going to help reduce your stress in the process and hopefully also help you to see that a freshman does not need necessarily to start worrying about the SAT right now, right? Give them time and space to acclimate. All of these things will come in time, but rushing them usually is just going to create stress just for stress's sake, and it's not necessarily going to help you get to your end point any faster. But if you can work on each of these different steps as the time comes, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to manage and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So that same place where you put in where you are tuning in from, you can put in any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And then in the meantime, I'll let you know when I'll be back. So I am going to be back on September 22nd, Sunday at 7 o'clock. And we're going to be talking about navigating those fall open houses. So, thinking about my current seniors and current juniors, open houses are awesome. They are a great way to learn a lot about a college. You're going to spend basically the whole day on that college campus. So great way to learn a lot about the school and help you see if your student can envision themselves there or not. So we're really going to dig into those, how to navigate them, how to really get the most out of that open house experience. So I'm excited to talk about that. September, fall, it's my favorite time of year. So it's a great time of year to visit college campuses too. The nice and cool, not too hot. Snow hasn't started yet up there in the Northeast. So good time to visit those colleges. Awesome. Well, this was a little longer than we usually go, so thanks for sticking with me, but it was a lot of information. I want to make sure you had a good plan for each year. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Have a great week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you back here on the 22nd. Bye.